Hey guys, election night 2022 is now officially over and we're entering election week because we still don't know who's going to win the Senate and we still don't know who's going to win the House. However, the fact that Democrats haven't lost both chambers of Congress just goes to show you how well they did last night. Democrats and Republicans are neck and neck in both chambers of Congress. The Democratic Party has crushed the red wave. The red wave did not exist. Democrats have won more governorships than they had going into this election for the first time. The incumbent party has done this since the 1980s. We also saw Democrats potentially expanding their majority in the Senate, and they're going to lose less House seats this year than they did in 2020 with the election of Joe Biden. So the red wave absolutely did not occur, but we do have quite a few races left that are going to decide who actually wins in the Senate and the House. It's not over for either party. Both parties have a considerable chance at winning both chambers in Washington. So starting off with the major Senate races that we had last night. In Washington, Patty Murray easily defeated Tiffany Smiley by a 14-point margin. I definitely underestimated Murray, but she will come out on top. In New Hampshire as well, Maggie Hassan, a very strong victory against Dawn Bolduc, an 8-point margin. It may go to a lesser margin as the numbers continue to go up for Bolduc, but in the end, Maggie Hassan is going to come out with a much stronger victory than expected. Wisconsin, Ron Johnson only leading by less than 2 points. It's going to be lean Republican, but it's worse than he did in 2016 and definitely not where Johnson expected to be today. Mandela Barnes has run a pretty strong campaign looking back, giving Ron Johnson a run for his money. However, in Ohio and North Carolina, J.D. Vance and Ted Budd were both elected by a 6-point margin in the Buckeye State and by a 4-point margin in the Tar Heel State. One of the biggest surprises we also had last night was in Florida. Marco Rubio winning re-election to a third term by 17 points against Val Demings, and Ron DeSantis winning by a 19-point margin against Charlie Crist. Florida pretty much is a red state at this point. Even in a midterm year like this, Marco Rubio still won Miami-Dade County, a county that voted for Hillary Clinton by a double-digit margin back in 2016. Now looking at the other races that are outstanding, Nevada, 78% of the votes in, Adam Laxalt with a 3-point lead. Masto is gaining, and it is going to look like 2020, but the exact opposite, because Masto is the one gaining, while in 2020, Trump was the one gaining votes in the very end, but Biden still came out on top. Now, in the Silver State this year, Masto is going to have to win a lot more votes in Clark County if she wants to come out on top, and she's also going to have to do better in the Reno area here in the northwestern region of the state, where Laxalt currently leads. And in 2016, Masto did win her first term, only winning Clark County. That's a county that Las Vegas is located in, so she can win with just this one county, but she is going to have to carry Clark County if she wants to win. And in Arizona, Blake Masters is doing much worse than expected against Mark Kelly. We're still probably going to see Carrie Lake elected over Katie Hobbs in the governor election. Democrats did not do well there, but in the Senate race, a current victory is expected for Mark Kelly. 51-46 to other numbers right now. Masto is gaining on Kelly. Kelly's probably going to win by under 3 points, but it is going to be a victory for the Democratic incumbent by all accounts. Mark Kelly is crushing Blake Masters in the vital Maricopa County, a county that he must win if he wants to carry Arizona for a second time in 2 years. We also saw that in Colorado, Michael Bennet defeated Joe Adea by a 12-point margin, much larger than expected. Basically, in every race across the country, except for Florida, Republicans did much worse than what polling had suggested, than what pundits had suggested. In Iowa, Chuck Grassley winning by a 12-point margin. That was pretty much what was expected. He was going to win by double digits, but it's not going to be a solid margin for Chuck Grassley against Michael Franken. We also had close races in Oklahoma. This is a 2-1 margin for James Lankford, but in the governor election, the race barely went to Kevin Stitt against Joy Hoffmeister in a year that should have been a red wave. We're going to go over the governor and House race as well. The House race is really interesting because Lauren Boebert might lose her re-election in Colorado. But we have one more Senate race I want to go over, and that is the one in Alaska. Kelly Tshibaka versus Lisa Murkowski. With it being 44-43, Lisa Murkowski is going to win her re-election in Alaska to a fourth full term. The Chesborough votes are going to split very handily in favor of Murkowski. Murkowski, the three-time incumbent, is now going to win again. This is another Trump candidate who lost. I mean, just looking at the map, Donald Trump ruined the odds for Republicans this year. If Trump didn't make some endorsements, I think Republicans could have won a lot more states. They probably could have won Arizona if they didn't choose Blake Masters, and they probably could have won Pennsylvania as well if they didn't choose Mehmet Oz. I mean, there are factors going for both parties going into the election. I mean, Joe Biden was unpopular. We had inflation, we had very high gas prices, but on the other side, the abortion issue has become a big deal for voters, and most people in the United States are pro-choice, and so that's really hurt Republican candidates who have set themselves up as being pro-life. I mean, Masters in Arizona, Oz in Pennsylvania, as well as many gubernatorial candidates in the Midwest, Tudor Dixon in Michigan. We also had Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania. Tim Michels was a little bit more moderate in Wisconsin. We're going to go over that race later, but the pro-life position has doomed Republicans, and also the election-denying position by many candidates. Yes, Kari Lake is probably going to win in Arizona, but most election deniers have lost. I mean, Mehmet Oz, not to the greatest extent, but still, he was a terrible candidate. He had nothing to do with Pennsylvania, but Blake Masters is on track to losing to Mark Kelly, and so is Herschel Walker in the runoff election. Yes, Warnock didn't win in the first round, but in the runoff, currently it is much more likely that Warnock comes out with a victory, as there's no more Brian Kemp there to help carry Republicans and Herschel Walker to victory. Now, looking at the House races that we had last night, we have a lot of major elections left, and right now the map stands 207-189. Democrats are a little bit behind, but they are going to win some more races. It does look like Jared Golden is going to win in the 2nd District of Maine. The 1st District of Montana is even really competitive between Zinke and Tranel. We have 2 outstanding districts in Washington, and one of the most interesting races that we have this year is in Colorado. Lauren Boebert is still behind Adam Frisch. This is one of the closest districts of the year, even though Trump won this district by 8 points in 2020. That's just how badly Lauren Boebert did in a district that Trump won by a likely margin, in a year that still did favor Republicans a lot more than in 2020. Adam Frisch winning would be a big deal for Democrats. Lauren Boebert is a very controversial member of Congress. In Maryland 6, we're currently seeing Republicans ahead, but that may flip for David Trone in the next few days. Illinois 17 is also very, very competitive. Democrats are winning many of the competitive races, but they are vulnerable in so many that it is more likely right now that Republicans are still going to come out with the majority. If we look at the betting markets here, Democrats have a 79% chance at winning the Senate. I'm going to reload here just so that we get a bit more updated of the numbers. We're going to see what the betting markets are showing us. The site is really being pressured a lot in terms of how many people are visiting it, but looking at who is going to win the Senate, right now we see Democrats with an 80% chance at doing so, Republicans at 21. If we look at the House, it's 90-10 in favor of Republicans, so definitely the GOP has a better chance in the House, but they're not going to win a big majority at all. We can come and look at the MSNBC projection right now for the House of Representatives. They have a forecast as to how it's going to go, and currently they project 222 seats for Republicans, 213 for Democrats, and this would be a net gain of 14. Honestly, a horrible showing. Republicans had 212 going into this election. There are many people saying Republicans were going to win a 40, 50, maybe even 60 seat majority, but that is not going to happen. The best they're going to do is a 10 seat majority at this point in time. Democrats are defending many of their most vulnerable seats, and in 2020, not a single Republican incumbent lost their re-elections. That is totally not the case this year. Yes, there was redistricting, but even in districts that stayed relatively the same, Republicans are not doing nearly as well as they were last time in some states. Now, the GOP did do well in Florida, of course, with Ron DeSantis and Marco Rubio winning their re-elections. They also did okay in Iowa. Currently, it is expected that all 4 states in Iowa go red after this cycle, as Cindy Axne has lost her re-election, but still in most states across the country, Democrats have heavily outperformed expectations. The 3 Nevada states are still currently too close to call. We have 3 incumbents, and this map was gerrymandered by Democrats as they tried to win 3 out of the 4 seats in Nevada. And so when looking at the House, it is currently expected that Republicans are going to take back the majority, but it's going to be a very narrow majority. Kevin McCarthy is going to have to get all of his representatives in line. And when looking at some things like the January 6th committee and also investigations potentially into Hunter Biden or the Biden family, it is much less likely that those things actually occur because of just how weak McCarthy's majority is. And there will definitely be some Republicans who aren't going to side with the most right-wing portion of the GOP. Now, moving on to the governor races that we had. We have a lot of major victories for Democrats. Colorado, Jared Polis winning by a solid margin to a second term. In New Mexico, Michelle Lujan Grisham winning by 6 points. That was very close to the expected margin. Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer defeats Tudor Dixon by a 10-point margin, much larger than expected. RCP, as well as many other pundits, had Tudor Dixon defeating Whitmer. I had it as being tilt Democratic. I really thought this race was going to go down to the wire because Michigan Democrats have always tended to underperform expectations, but with the national environment favoring Democrats much more than Republicans, Gretchen Whitmer is going to win a second term by a pretty strong margin, larger even than her margin from 2018. That's just how well Democrats did. They've so far flipped 2 governorships, those being Massachusetts and Maryland. In Kansas, this is a big victory for Laura Kelly. The abortion issue has put her across the finish line. The abortion referendum failed 60-40 earlier this summer, and so that really shows you that even Kansas is a pro-choice state. Without that referendum, it's probably more likely that Derek Schmidt could have won. So Republicans really shot themselves in the foot there. In Wisconsin, Tony Evers defeats Tim Michaels by a 3-point margin. He was by far, in my opinion, the most vulnerable Democrat going into their re-election. No Democrat has won a gubernatorial race in Wisconsin with a Democratic president in the White House since 1962. Tony Evers has defied history and won by 3 times the margin he won by in 2018 when he ran against a Republican incumbent that was running for a 3rd term, and that incumbent was Scott Walker. In Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro destroying Doug Mastriano by almost a solid margin. Democrats won here by 17 points in 2018. They're going to win by a similar margin this time around. In Minnesota, Tim Walz defeating Scott Jensen by 7 points, a little bit larger than expected, but not by that much. South Carolina was solid for McMaster. In Georgia, Brian Kemp easily defeats Stacey Abrams, but again, the Senate election was so close, and that's because of candidate quality. Herschel Walker is just so much worse of a candidate than Brian Kemp. Same thing in Pennsylvania. Even though John Fetterman looked pretty weak in the end because of his stroke, Mehmet Oz was still so bad of a candidate that he is still losing against Fetterman by 4 points. And the victory for Pennsylvania for John Fetterman, this is going to be one of the biggest calls of last night. This is going to be the only flip possible, though, for Democrats. Republicans might have one more. We'll see what happens. But right now, the Keystone State is going to go blue, and Democrats are going to control both Senate seats there, the other senator being Democrat Bob Casey. And looking at some of the other major governor races, Ron DeSantis winning by 19 points in Florida. The state is not trending well for Democrats, there's no doubt about that. Greg Abbott winning by the expected 10-11 point margin against Beto O'Rourke. Still better for Democrats than 2018, but O'Rourke was seen as a much better candidate and nominee. In Iowa, as well as Ohio, Republicans winning by solid margins, Kim Reynolds and Mike DeWine. New York, the race was very close in the end, but Kathy Hochul still managed a 6-point victory. And honestly, if Kathy Hochul did better, Democrats might be able to win the House. They might have been able to win if Kathy Hochul wasn't so unpopular, because if you look at the closest House districts right now, New York 18, Pat Ryan leads by 0.8%, but in 17, it was a 2-point margin. In New York 19, Molinaro defeats Riley by a 2-point margin, and in 22 it's currently a 2-point margin. So this really is a very, very close map in New York, and if Kathy Hochul was more popular and Democrats did better statewide, if Andrew Cuomo didn't have all of his issues, Democrats will probably be able to pick up at least 2, maybe 3, even 4 more seats in the Empire State. I mean, Chuck Schumer only won his re-election by 13 points. That's what the current projection is, with 94% of the votes in. And so we're looking at the 3 outstanding governor races in Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona. We see Katie Hobbs currently tied with Kari Lake, but this is with Mark Kelly leading by 5 points against Blake Masters. So it is currently looking like a victory for Lake here. In Nevada, Steve Sisolak 4 points behind Joe Lombardo. Joe Lombardo up by 4 points despite Masto and Laxalt being almost tied. So it is more likely now that Joe Lombardo replaces Steve Sisolak. Lombardo was one of the better Republican nominees this year. And in Oregon, Tina Kotek is going to defeat Christine Drazen. 99% of the votes in. She leads by 3 points. Republicans were definitely overestimated here, but it's still going to be a very, very narrow victory. So looking forward, we have the election in Georgia. That runoff may give Democrats the majority if they cannot win in the state of Nevada. And so the betting markets here are kind of messed up because of just how much traffic there is to the site. But Catherine Cortez Masto right now has a 70% chance at winning in Nevada. The odds have been going up and down over the last few hours. It's going to be very, very close because Masto is still very vulnerable. And in the end, I mean, the bad weather on election day might be what makes Adam Laxalt lose this race, which is going to be really bad for Republicans if that's what actually occurs, because there was a lot of snow in this northern area that definitely did have an impact on turnout. And so when looking at my forecast for the 2022 races, I did have Democrats winning in Arizona, which is going to be correct in the end. This is according to my forecast model. Pennsylvania, I had as tilt Republican. It was one of the 4 toss-up races, but it does look like it's going to go to the Democrats. Nevada, it could go both ways, but it was very narrowly a tilt Republican state as well, mainly because of the very favorable natural environment for the GOP and also their very late surge. But the Georgia runoff, this was projected to be a runoff because it was a tilt state and it was by a very, very narrow margin. And so with a less than 1% margin and also a libertarian candidate, it was not likely that either Warnock or Walker were going to get to 50%. So my forecast is probably going to be wrong in at least one race, maybe 2, if Democrats can pull off a very, very narrow victory in Nevada. But looking forward, we have the Georgia runoff, and I do have a forecast here. Currently, there is no number here for the forecast score, which is how I rate the races, but it will come very soon as we get data for the runoff election. And in 2021, the forecast was correct in predicting both victories for Democrats. The Georgia runoff here, Democrats winning with Raphael Warnock, and in the regular runoff, we had the victory of John Ossoff over David Perdue. So make sure you stick with me for the next month as I cover the Georgia runoff elections as well as the remaining results that we have coming in from Nevada, Arizona, and then of course Alaska. We're going to see the victory for Lisa Murkowski as the ranked choice votes are in. And then one more governor election, and that's Alaska. Mike Dunleavy is going to defeat Les Gara and Bill Walker in the first round. That's what results are currently showing. Bill Walker being the former governor of Alaska, serving from 2014 until 2018. So that will be it for this video. A big victory for Democrats nationwide. Just look at how we're still trying to see who's going to win, and that just goes to show you that 2022 was not a red wave. Joe Biden has defied the odds. Now, the reason why Democrats won is not because of Joe Biden. I don't think he played that big of a factor at all. Now, passing the Inflation Reduction Act, I think, did have an impact, but in the end, it's going to be the abortion issue, the terrible candidates that Trump endorsed, as well as, of course, the election denialism, and again, the pro-choice, pro-life debate. That's going to have a major impact on elections going forward. Republicans are going to need to change up their strategy going into 2024 if they want to have a shot at potentially taking back the Senate and, of course, the presidency. So things looking very good for Democrats. Republicans have been trounced this year. There'll be more Democratic governors going into 2023 than there were as we leave 2022. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will keep you guys updated over the next few days as we get more projections. Still, daily uploads will continue here, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys very, very soon.